Well, I think I'm going to at least do a little bit of my wind up for the talk. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? Enjoying NDC? Yeah? Yeah? How many of you, this is your first time in Sydney? A couple, right? Yeah, cool. It's a cool city, isn't it? I was last here in 1999, so it's been a long time and it's changed a lot, but it's still a very cool city. And I'm happy to be back. I hope I don't wait another 25 years to come back to Sydney, Australia. So I want to get a couple of just housekeeping things out of the way. One, I'm so appreciative of everyone here. I do want to say there are some really amazing talks like in this time slot as well. And so like if you want to sneak out, like you won't hurt my feelings, Damien Brady, who works with me at GitHub, is giving a talk on Copilot. Amy Kaepernick's doing front-end testing with GitHub Actions. So there's like a lot of GitHub sauce in this hour. So I'm happy to have you here, but also know that like you made a decision to like not go to a session to be with me, and I really appreciate that. I will also say that this talk is not about making your applications backwards compatible. I use that as a nice kind of pithy statement to apply to my career. So every time I've given this talk, someone would say, you know, this was a great talk, but I thought you were going to talk about backward compatibility from a software or hardware perspective. So if you're that person, I will not be offended at all if you slowly just kind of go out to the side. It's a good talk, I will say, but I do think that sometimes the title trips people up. But I want to also poll the audience because I always like to know the people that I'm working with. How many of you have not yet gotten that first job in technology? Anyone in the room? Okay, so everyone's gotten that first job. All right, let's do this. How many of you are in your first year of your career in software development? No? Oh, we got some seasoned people. Okay, how many of you are like 3 years in or less? Okay, there are a couple. Okay. How many of you are at the like 5-year and under mark? Okay. How many of you have been managers before? We got some managers. How many of you tried to be a manager, you hated it, and went back to being an IC? I know, I get it, I've been there, I've thought about it many times, so I totally understand. I actually think that companies now are giving people the opportunity to like try on the manager role. And if you don't like it, like there's no judgment, you can go back to being an IC. I actually think that more companies should support that. I think that if you don't do that, you either lose good engineers or you make really bad managers. So I'm glad that people are doing that. So again, I'm Anjuan Simmons, and this is the talk that I wish someone gave me when I was in like year 1 of my career, maybe year 2, or even like year 10. So I've been building software for a living since 1997. That's when I started at Accenture doing large enterprise like Oracle and SAP applications. So I cut my teeth on big software projects. That's where I became a manager for the first time. That's why I learned how to lead teams. And this talk really goes into what I learned over my journey. Now, I have to give the caveat that while I definitely learned many lessons that I want to share with you, there are things that I'm going to say that people may disagree with. That's fine. Everyone's journey is different. I'm talking about what I've learned about building software and working in teams. So I do want to say that. And everything that I say may be up for debate, but I want to share things that I've seen work really, really well. So I want to give that caveat. Now, to give you a little bit more information about my career in software development, like I said, I started my career at some big companies, right? So started out Accenture in the late 90s. I'm officially an old person. I went over to Deloitte, so still in the consulting model. And I'm now a staff engineering manager at a little company called GitHub. But there have been some places along the way that I've also worked at, smaller startups that you may not have heard of. So like I've done the big company, we're talking multi-billion-dollar global companies, and I've done the trying to make the first $1 million company really small where everyone has to wear multiple hats. And over my career, I've really learned both sides. And I've learned that there are certain things that are often not said. These things may not be said, but they're usually expected of you. And so I want to say some of those unspoken truths, at least truths that I've learned about working in software. So let's go to the beginning of your career. In fact, let's go to before the beginning, and let's go over to where you're getting hired. So you're either maybe out of uni, or maybe you went to a boot camp, or maybe you're self-taught, and you're trying to get that first job. Now, no one in this room raised their hand to say that you're in that position, but I've been in that position starting my career, and I've been on the other side of the desk as a hiring manager. I'm hiring at GitHub, by the way, so hit me up if you're looking for work. We're actually hiring quite a bit right now. And so I've hired at Accenture, I've hired at a lot of different companies, so I've seen both sides of the desk. And one thing that I wish someone had told me when I had my first job, because like a lot of you, I did mock interviews, I did study coding books and architecture, trying to get ready for that first interview. And I put a lot of effort about what I was going to do. I even mapped out the interview. I was like, okay, I got 45 minutes. So in the first 5 minutes, I'm going to do this, then I'm going to hit them with that, and then I'm going to tell them all about this. And what I did not know is one thing that I found to be true, and that is when you start your career, that person on the other side of the table usually knows if they're going to move you on the process or not within the first 5 minutes. Within the first 5 minutes. And it's not something that people are going to admit, but that first 5 minutes is really crucial. Now, I try as a hiring manager, even if someone's off on the wrong foot, or maybe they stumble through an answer, or there's some kind of glitch, give them grace. So I'll give them the whole time frame, but that first 45 minutes is often very instructive. So it's very important, even though you may have a plan for the 45 minutes or for the hour that you have for the interview, you want to maximize the first 5 minutes. And there are a couple things that you can do. One thing is very obvious, and that's don't be late to the interview. Don't be late. I always drive around the block a couple of times. If my interview's at 3, I'm getting to the area at 2:30. I'm going to the lobby at 2:45 just to make sure that there's nothing that's going to keep me from being there. Or even on Zoom, I make sure that my internet's where it needs to be, that my camera is working. Because there are reasons why you might be late, but it's almost always a bad impression. So that's the one thing that I will say is that being punctual is like your mother, your father, your legal guardian, whatever, told you when you were young. That's very true. Being late is just a bad look. So to increase your chance of having that first 5 minutes go your way, make sure that you're there at second 0. The other thing that I'm going to say about making sure that you use that first 5 minutes is when someone asks you a question, maybe because you're nervous, you may want to give a very full-throated, lengthy answer. And often it's better to be concise, because I've been the interviewer where I'm asking someone a question and it's the second question on my list of 10 questions to ask, and they spend 10, 15 minutes on that question. And it's always okay to give a direct answer to the question and then say, would you like to know more? And then I'm like, sure. Or no, I'm good. I got what I need. And that's something that most people don't know, is that the interviewer is usually going through a list of questions against a rubric that they're trying to understand your background, what you bring to the table. And so by going on and on and on in an answer, you're not showing that you respect the interviewer's time, nor are you showing that you understand how to manage a clock in that kind of environment. So that's one thing that I will say is something that most people don't really say. Also, when you're talking about what you've done, and this is something that I would also say applies to your resume, don't just focus on activity. I've seen so many candidates spend time talking about, I did this many pull requests, and I had this many deployed to production, and I worked on this many features. That's all well and good, but most hiring managers, we're not looking for activity. We're looking for impact. What impact did you have on the teams that you worked on? You can have a lot of activity and have very little impact. Conversely, you can have actually a really big impact with a little activity. And I think that the art of working in this industry is figuring that out. Did you help the team write cleaner code? Did you improve the peer review process? Did you improve the process that the team uses to decide what they're going to build? Did you work with the product manager and helping them understand how to create a roadmap? That's impact in terms of the team, in terms of the product, in terms of the company, in terms of the customers. We hire people to have impact, not to simply have activity. Now, one thing that I've championed, because I've been a hiring manager and I've interviewed people from multiple countries and I've worked at a lot of global companies, is I've pushed for making the interview questions public. Because most companies, the interview questions are in a repository or, walled off from public view. And I understand reasons that people do that, but I've always felt that having the interview questions be private really does a disservice to two groups of people. One, there are some people, when you ask them a question, they can come right back at you with a great answer, right? They're quick on their feet. They really have a good way of explaining what they've done. And coming off the cuff is really easy. There are other people, and I'm one of them, where I need time to process. I need time to think about my answer to the question. Because you just asked me a question out of the blue. You're a stranger. I'm feeling stranger danger. I'm in this place I've never been before. So I may be nervous. And so I often need time to process. And I cannot tell you how many times I've left an interview, and this is back before remote work was a thing, right? So I go back to the parking garage, get in my car, and I think about question number 4, and I'm like, I had such a better answer than I gave during the interview. I had a great answer. But because I did not know what the question would be in advance, I could not give an answer that really would have showed the abilities that I can bring to the team. Now, some people say that we're working in software development, you work with ambiguity and lack of information. So I get that, but an interview is not how you write code, right? Most of us get problems that we have time to research, to look at other code samples, look at code we've written before, look at websites where you can get guidance. We have opportunities to get informed answers. So why do we force people in an interview to show something that we really don't use in the day-to-day work? So that's the first group that I think are not served by having private interview questions. The second group are people where English is not their native language. There are many people in software development, some of you may be even in this room, where you did not learn English as your first language. English may be your second, your third, your fourth language. But because I've worked for American companies, that means that we have the questions in English. So I've always felt for someone where I ask the question in English, they hear it in English, translate it to whatever German, get their answer in German, and then translate it back to English to tell me the answer. And I think that having the interview questions publicly available is just a really simple solution to just level the playing field and allow everyone to bring their best self to the interview. I think it's a very, very simple thing. And I've convinced at least one company to do this. And it's very simple to just implement. Whenever you send an email to the candidate, and we send emails to candidates all the time, just say, hey, all the questions that will be asked in the interview are in this repo. And they can go to the repo and get the questions in advance. Now, I've heard the arguments where you're going to get people with rehearsed answers and people are going to memorize their answers. And my response is, people do that anyway. That already is happening. People already do that. Because people Google for interview questions and they have people who work at the company. Hey, what are the questions? So if you have the privilege to have that kind of access, you already have that benefit. It's the other people who don't have that time, right? I think about people who are single parents, who are trying to raise kids and don't have time to Google interview questions. Why don't we just make the playing field level and give everyone access? I think we get better results. We get better prepared candidates. It's more fair. It just totally makes sense. And so I'm actually working with a couple other companies to see, can we make this something that we just do? I think the industry would be well served. The other thing is that if someone knows all the interview questions, sure, they can come up with an answer, but I can always ask a follow-up question, right? So I may say, hey, tell me about a time when you dealt with a very weak spec from like the product manager. There were no design assets attached. There were no definition of done. There was no way of knowing. You can give me a rehearsed answer, but I can say, well, tell me about how you work with the designer to get that asset. Tell me more about the product manager. Were they part of your team? Were they on a different team? Did they come to your daily stand-ups, right? So in the follow-up, I can get more signal if I need it. So I think that you really get a lot of benefit from just making the interview questions public. Now, the one thing I will say is that if you're interviewing at a company that has public interview questions, look at the questions before coming to the interview. Because at a company that I convinced to put the questions online, a person came into the interview process and I asked like question number 2, that's in the public repo. And they were like, that's a great question. And I'm like, I know, I wrote the question. It's like been unpublic for like the past 6 months. And so like that does signal that you're not using something that we're giving you. So I will say, if you happen to go to a company that does that, make sure that you read the questions. That's really, really important. So another thing that I want to go into that I did not know during that first year, right? So I would get an offer, and because I was a poor college student, I did not look at all the offers with the scrutiny that I really should have. And I took an offer that was one of the initial offers. Something that people will not tell you about how offers are created is that offers are based on budget. And when you're hiring for a candidate for like a senior engineer or a staff engineer or whatever, you have a budget for how many people you can hire. And no one's gonna say this, and I really don't think this is explicit, but you wanna get the person that can do the job for the least amount of money. Because if someone takes the first offer, it may be not the best offer, but they take it, then great, I've just freed up more budget to hire in the future, right? And again, people don't do this explicitly, and some people actively work to not do this, but that first offer is often not the best offer. You can say, hey, thanks for the offer, would love to work here. I just think the offer is a little bit lower than what I was expecting, right? You want to have research to back it up, and there's ways to do that, but don't be afraid to negotiate. And this is something that people of color and women often don't do. And then you get this pay disparity over the years, because whatever amount of money you accept in your first year, you're almost always going to be behind, and the wage gap will grow because you weren't one of the people who negotiated. So you may say, well, how do I negotiate? I feel like I'm being disrespectful. I know in Western culture, like we're often culturally cultivated to avoid conflict and to not want to get into a discussion about things like money. But we do this for a living. So one of the ways that I help people who are, again, it's that first job offer that they're trying to get, one, if you can, develop multiple offers. Because what you want to be able to do is see what is the market offering, and then understand, okay, company A is offering this, company B is offering maybe a little bit less than this, company C somewhere in the middle. And then that way you get a sense, okay, what is the market putting, what value is the market putting on my skills? But you have to move from thinking about salary, which we can understand, to total compensation, right? Your salary is just one part of your total compensation. There's 401k match, there's vacation, there's getting budget to buy books, go to conferences, things like that. So what you can do is that if you think about total compensation and you have multiple offers, if you have an offer from a company that you really like, you can say, hey, the salary is not really what I'm looking for, but can I get more vacation? Can I normally I have to wait 6 months to get the company match. Can I get it at the 3-month mark? And what you'll often find is when they cannot budge on the salary, there's other parts of the total compensation package that you can pull levers on. So that you may not get like a dollar amount that you're looking for, but you can say, can I get more RSUs? Can I get more stock, more options, whatever? Don't be afraid to negotiate, especially if you're in that first year, all right? So that's getting hired. Now let's go to the first year. Congratulations, you've gotten a job, you're making that shmoney, you're able to buy a nice car, you're able to start paying on that student debt, you're feeling really good about yourself, you're learning how to work, and you're starting to build the skills, right? All those skills you learned, learning code and computer science, and most of that stuff is really garbage, and you don't you actually use it. But you understand programming languages and frameworks, and you start learning how to work in teams. It's very exciting. But the one thing I wish I knew in my first year at Accenture is this: your work does not speak for itself. It doesn't have a mouth. You have to speak for your work. I know a lot of us use Netflix and Amazon Prime and Disney Plus and all these streaming services, so a lot of people don't go to the movies anymore. But if you've ever driven by a cinema or a movie theater, what do you see? You see what's playing at that theater, right? There may be a movie playing that you haven't seen before. Maybe after the Oscars, you want to see, I want to see that movie. And that marquee tells you what's going on at that movie theater. You have to make the marquee for your career at work. Because I'm a manager. I manage a team of 7 engineers right now. I've managed bigger teams, smaller teams. I think I'm a pretty thoughtful manager. I really work hard to understand what my team is doing. But even I forget what so-and-so did 2 weeks ago, let alone 2 months ago. So you have to take ownership of letting the company know what's playing in your career. What are you doing for the company? Because even the most thoughtful manager, if you have anything more than, let's say, 2 direct reports, it's really hard to know what's going on. So you have to take ownership of letting people know what you're doing at the company. Julia Evans, who's an amazing engineer, wrote what to me is the canonical document or post about what's called a brag doc. Have you heard about a brag doc? Anybody heard about that? Yeah? A brag doc is simply a document of what you've done, right? And it's really important that this is a contemporaneous, in real-time document, because even you will forget what you did last week. You'll forget that bug you fixed. You'll forget that improvement to the process. You'll forget what you've done, because we're all living our lives. And it's really important that you learn to document. Now, brag may be too much of a ostentatious, maybe term to use, but it's a document of what you've done. And so you just make sure that you keep a list, put the date stamp on it, and said, I did so-and-so and work with this team. Remember, don't talk about activity, talk about impact. What impact did you have on the team, on the process, on the technology? What did you do for the company? What did you do for customers? And the benefit of having this document is that when you get to performance review season, we all probably work at companies where maybe you do it at the end of the year, maybe you do it at the mid-year, whatever cadence it is, instead of having to remember 6 months or 12 months, who knows what happened 6 days ago? You're not having to try to figure out what you did. You're pulling up your brag doc. You might have to update it maybe the last week or so, but you can just go into your performance system and just, okay, this is what I did. And when I've had direct reports that have done that, there are so many things that I forgot you did that. That was amazing. You did that, and that made this so much easier. Again, even the most thoughtful and intentional manager is not going to remember everything that you did. And by having a document of that, it sounds simple, but it can be so powerful. So I really want to make sure that you talk about impact, like I said before. Now, most of you work at companies where you have levels, right? So you might have a senior engineer 1, then 2. I'm not senior software engineer 1, software engineer 2. Might have senior staff, principal, different levels. Does everyone have that written down somewhere? You have you know where to go, kind of, sort of? Okay, kind of, sort of. All right, so that's a project we can work on maybe. Talk to me afterwards, right? Because that's really important. At GitHub and most companies, we just have a repo or a page where we describe all the levels and we describe what's expected. And it's really important that if you're going to do this brag doc, that you always communicate your impact in terms of what's expected. Because when I'm thinking about people to give rewards to, and a big part of the performance is letting you know kind of what you did and documenting that, but also there's a separate conversation about how do we reward that impact. And you want to use that career ladder, whatever you call it at your company, to use that as a language. So they expect you to have a certain approach to writing code or coding standards or whatever is expected of you. Like some senior engineers are, if we look, or let's say staff engineers, we begin to look more than just code contributions. We may look for you to be more of a leader. We may look for you to do bigger architectural design projects. It's not just working in your team, but working across teams, right? You want to know what's expected of you because you need to make sure that you communicate your impact in those terms. I know that in a lot of companies that I've worked at, and I'm going to say this is really not very fair, but if you want to be promoted, you have to show next level performance right now. So if you're a senior engineer, I know I see the head shaking. I know it's free labor and it's not fair. But if you want to be a staff engineer and you're a senior engineer, the level below staff at most companies, we want to see staff level work. You don't got to do all the expectations of a staff engineer, but you got to show some of the bona fides of a staff engineer. We want to see glimmering that you're almost already operating at the next level. Now, the challenge of that is that you're doing above and beyond work. You're making the case for promoting you to staff because we can see that you're doing it, but you are doing work at a level above that you're being paid for. But unfortunately, the reality is that a lot of companies ask for that. So I say that because when you're looking at that career ladder, you want to make sure that you're not just looking at level, you want to look at the next level, and that's what you're going for. You want to begin to figure out what plan can I make? How can I partner with my engineering manager to make sure that I get opportunities to show that kind of next level performance? That's really important. But even if you're not going for a promotion, every reward cycle that I've been a part of, the people who are thoughtful about documenting their impact, it's just more signal. And it's really easier for that signal to exert a gravitational pull for rewards. And that's just how it works. All right, I mentioned your engineering manager. Again, another thing that I wish that I had knew in that first year, please, please, please take advantage of having one-on-ones with your manager. Does anyone here have one-on-ones with your manager? Okay, lots of hands. That's great. I did not appreciate one-on-ones. We didn't really call them one-on-ones back then. In fact, a lot of times my manager was some remote person that I saw maybe like once a month. But I'm so happy that in our industry, one-on-ones are just, it's expected. Like you cannot be an engineering manager at GitHub or even kind of leader and not have one-on-ones. I mean, people will look at you funny, right? It's really important that you do that. But as an engineering manager, I really appreciate it when the ICs that report to me, when my direct reports bring agenda items to the one-on-one, right? Like a lot of people, I have a Google Doc that we just put a date against, and then I put stuff into that doc to talk about in my next one-on-one, and then my direct report can also do the same. And most do, but some don't. But if you just put things that you want to talk about in the one-on-one, you're communicating to your manager that I respect your opinion. I respect your guidance. I appreciate the fact that you have skills and knowledge that can help me with my career. It's a very, very simple thing. But over my career, I've had so many people where like the one-on-one is like, we start the one-on-one. Hey, Bob, how's it going? Fine. All right, I want to go over, change the rewards package for this part of the company, and we're doing this, and I want to let you know. Great. All right, well, is there anything that you want to talk about? No. And that's like weeks and months of doing that. And this person may be totally fine, and I can try to find other avenues to understand and support them. But a one-on-one is your manager taking time out of their busy schedule to give you their undivided attention. And that is precious time. Bring things to the one-on-one. if there's things about the company, about the industry, about your career. If you want to get promoted, you want to talk about that in your one-on-one doc with your manager. Don't try to do this stuff solo. You have a manager for a reason. Like, it's my job to understand what you need from me, from the team, from the company, but I cannot solve what I don't know about. And one-on-ones are like the fine built-in time to do that. So I wish that I had understood that in that first year. The other thing, and this is, no one's gonna say this, so I'm gonna whisper. Okay, no, I'm not gonna whisper. Over my career, I have either directly been asked this question, or I've talked to people who have been asked this question, and it's basically this. Let's say I have a team of 8 people, and I call into a Zoom, or if we're in person, I walk into a room, and they say, we need to cut half your team. Who are you gonna cut? Your manager has probably either been asked that question, or they may be asked it, and most managers can answer that within 10 seconds. I mean, we've been keeping notes. We pay attention. And you can be on one side of the cut or on the other side of the cut. And the people that make it are the people who take one-on-one seriously. They document their impact. They're contributing, they're making contributions to the team. And nothing will protect you when the hand of the company comes for you, but you can do so much to make sure that if your manager is asked that question, you're on that 50% that sticks around, right? No one's gonna say that, but most managers, if we were dragged into the corner and forced to answer, we can name the 50% of the team that we will let go. And we know the 50% of the team who are pillars of the team, they're like, oh no, we need to have these people. You wanna be in the latter, not the former, all right? All right, so let's go on to the next stage. You've made it past that first year. You're into year 2 and 3. You learn how to work in teams. You actually understand how GitHub Flow works. You learn all these things about programming and frameworks, and maybe you had a couple of managers and you actually know the things that you like about a manager here, but I don't like that about a manager. So you're beginning to do more complicated work and you're feeling, really, really good about it. But one thing that I always struggled to understand in those first 2 or 3 years is, how do I know that people value me? How do I know that I'm making the right relationships with my team? Because I'm standing on this stage in front of a room that has a lot of people on it, and I'm fine, but I'm an introvert. I'm a classical introvert. As soon as this session is over, if you want to ask questions, please come up to me. I love people, and I will answer any question that you give me, but I'm going to probably collapse about an hour from now. Because like most introverts, I'm drained by people. I love people, but I'm drained by people. And so I know that about myself. And I know that being an introvert, we often struggle to know, how can I understand this people thing? And how can I navigate relationships and all that? And how do I know that I'm actually a valued member of the team? How do I know that I'm making the relationships that I need that are so powerful? Because early in my career, I'm I write the code, it's good, right? I'm good, right? Maybe for a little while, but we work in teams, and teams are important. So there's multiple ways that you can gauge how you're doing, but one thing that I've learned is that that people value you when they tell you things that are private, when they tell you things that they would not like public put on Twitter, when they tell you things that could maybe even hurt them. Because early in my career, I was not that person. I did my job. I went home, thought I was good. And then I was always getting surprised. Oh, what, this person, they're changing teams? Or this person's leaving the company? I didn't know because no one would tell me anything. But then over the years, I began to understand how to build relationships. And then people would come to me and be like, hey, Anjuan, I'm not, you're the first person that I'm telling you, but you know what? I'm looking for another job because I'm tired of this manager, or I don't like this policy, or I don't like what the CEO did. And so when people come to you and tell you that stuff, that if it got out, it could hurt them, that's when you know you're starting to build the relationships that you need to thrive. I've had people tell me that they're looking for another job, that they found a job that they're going to quit pretty soon. I've had people tell me that they're pregnant and that they're trying to figure out how to work out maternity leave, all stuff that like they're only telling 1, 2, or 3 or fewer people. And if you do that, that's like a litmus test for knowing, okay, if you trust me with this, then I think we have a connection. And these connections are really, really important. You may be wondering, well, how do I do this, right? How do I become that person that gets that private information? Well, there are a couple ways, but one thing that I found is that if you want to get trust, you have to give trust. If you want people to be vulnerable with you, you have to be vulnerable with them. So you have to be willing to kind of tiptoe up to the line and kind of share something that's like not super private, but like it's in the gray area, and just be human. Like, you know, at least in America, we're very trained when someone says, how's it going? Like, I'm doing great. How are you? Right? And, you know, you're really doing terrible, right? But so instead of doing that kind of conditioned response, say, hey, you know, I'm actually not feeling my best today. You know, I have a newborn child and they don't sleep through the night. I was walking them around for 4 hours last night and just didn't go back to sleep and I'm really tired, right? Just even saying that, it's being real, it's being human. And a lot of culture kind of gets that humanity out of you so that you can kind of conform. I would encourage you to like bring your true self to your job because people prize that level of genuine humanity. And I do understand that your mileage may vary and there are some companies, there are some managers that won't appreciate that. And I feel for you and I hope that you can find a better situation. But where you can do that, I believe that if you can bring your full self to work, people will appreciate that and they'll give more of who they are to you. And that is powerful. It's not just powerful for just work, but it's powerful for being human. All right. The next thing that I wish I knew in that first 3 years is to be very careful about doing what's called glue work. Anyone heard the term glue work? Okay. So Tanya Riley, who's an amazing speaker who I've had the privilege of like doing conference events with, she to me really explained glue work, right? So glue work are those things that need to get done that don't directly tie to the success of the team, but are so important to do, right? A few examples of glue work are taking the minutes at meetings, or cleaning up the backlog, or going through and triaging issues, or doing work with the product manager to make sure that you get all the things you need in the spec. That's all valuable work, and I don't want to like really be too hard on this work because it's really important work. But if you're a software engineer, that's not why we pay you. We want you to write code, we want you to deliver code to production so that customers can give us money. So if you're doing this, and I have to be honest, women especially get stuck with this, and it's terrible, and it often leads to women not getting promoted at the pace that they deserve because they're doing glue work, but that's taking away from their engineering work. So if you're that person, male, female, whatever, then it's important to understand that if you're going to do that, you need to have a conversation with your manager about, do you, manager, value this work? Especially if you want to have a promotion. You want to be able to say, hey, I'm doing all this work, and I want to make sure that in 3 months, 6 months, when we have a promotion conversation, and we got to start putting together a promotion packet, that this is all stuff that will like speak loudly about my suitability for promotion. And you need to have your manager tell you yes or no. And I've had this conversation and I've been told, no, that's not really, no, it's like if you go back to the career ladder and that stuff is not really there, then you have to have a harder conversation and say, I'm going to stop doing that work because I want to be promoted, or I want to be appreciated, or I want to make sure that when it comes to reward season that I can maximize that, because I need to focus on those things and not on these nice things. So that's really, really important. Now, some managers are going to be like, oh, no, totally. I'm going to have your back. Get it in writing, but I'm going to have your back. And so you can say, hey, after this meeting that you very kindly got their consent that they're going to have your back, shoot them a Slack message or maybe an email and say, we had a great conversation. I'm glad that you said you're going to have my back if I do bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page, right? And so you want to see them. And I hate to be that way, but like, it's just, again, human nature, memories are short, whatever. That's super important because if you don't do that, often you'll spend weeks, if not months, maybe years doing all this work, and you'll be disappointed that you're not getting the outcome that you want. So I would be very, very careful with glue work. Again, this is very essential work, but you want to make sure that whatever value, the people who rate you see it as being valuable work that's aligned with what you want to get from the company. All right. Okay. What's up? 5 years, 6 years in, you decide to become a manager. You decide to take that weird trip and you start managing teams, right? Now, I want to pause here and say that I am so happy that in the past at least 5 years, I've seen an appreciation for the fact that there are some people who are engineers that you can have a long-lived and full-throated and valuable up to distinguished engineer if you want. And there's also a path if you want to, maybe you made senior engineer and you're like, you know what, I want to try becoming a people manager. And there's like a people management track. Because for most of my career, we took engineers up to maybe like the midpoint of the ladder. And if you wanted to keep going, you had to become a manager. And I know you've heard people say this. I lived through this. At Accenture, it was up or out. If you did not go from like analyst to consultant, these are like basically the programming titles, and then didn't make manager at a certain point, and this is the late 90s, it was like, you gotta go, right? We forced people out. So we lost good engineers, and we also made people into bad managers. And I said it earlier, but I want to put a finer point on that because people felt that I had to just jump into this field of people management that I'm really not good at and do it because I want to keep working here. And I'm so happy that at most companies, you have those two paths that are supported, that are really very important. But the one thing about being a manager that I didn't know when I got my first team at Accenture to manage, and it wasn't a big team, but I now know that teams are like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And I've had people, whenever I've joined a company or joined a new team, and maybe they'll write about like a little document, and that's nice about, okay, so-and-so, you know, they are the people who work on this part of the project, and then this is the person that does this, and you should know this about them. But often you don't get any of that. It's just the wild, wild west, right? So no one tells you that, oh, this person is burned out and is almost on the verge of like rage quitting. And this person, well, they want to be a manager, so they're going to pick apart what you do and tell you how you're doing everything wrong. Oh, and then this person and this person, they actually hate each other, and they're actively trying to destroy each other's career. Like, you don't get any of that. You discover that along the way. And so I've learned as a manager to be able to understand, okay, what are some of the not code smells, but just people smells that help me understand, oh, okay, I think I know what's happening here, right? Because it's really important to know that as soon as possible. Like, I have had people tell me, because, you know, one of the things that I do when in the first one-on-one, maybe the second one, is ask some questions about, all right, well, give me a sense of like, do you like me to be more involved in your work, or should I just step back and then you'll give me updates? And I always ask the question about, how do you like to receive feedback? Do you like to be clear feedback? Do you like it to be delivered in written form? Do you like it to be delivered in verbal form? How do you like to receive feedback, right? This is all the classical management stuff. I've had so many people say, oh yeah, I love feedback. And then another question I ask is, do you want me to, like, if something happens that I want to give you feedback on, do you want to like immediately, or should I like wait a while, right? I'm trying to understand how this person receives feedback because everyone's different in how they like this to be received. And on multiple occasions, someone has told me, oh yeah, I want clear feedback immediately. And I give them that clear feedback immediately, and they crumble. And I'm like, wait a minute, we had this conversation. So a lot of people will tell you, because you're a manager, right? You're their manager, to tell you what they think you want to hear, not actually how they feel. And a part of the art of management It's being able to distinguish, like, is this person telling me what I want to hear? Or are they actually being true to me? And, it's actually a little bit arrogant as a manager to assume that people are going to be their true selves with you, like day one, week one, even month one, quarter one. Because as a manager, there is a huge disproportionate power imbalance, right? I have a lot of power over this person. Even though I'm coming to them like, I'm Anjuan, I'm here to help, and all that, like, no one's gonna believe me. I didn't believe that when my managers told me that stuff. I'm like, yeah, okay. Because most of us, if you've been in the game for a while, you've been traumatized by past managers. And you have that trauma behind you all, and you don't know, are you like a trauma 1 type manager or trauma 2 type manager, right? You're trying to figure out, like, are you a safe person? So, like, I totally get it. So I always know that I'm not going to meet the real person that's working for me for probably a few weeks, maybe a few months. But if I do my work, if I try to show compassion, if I try to show patience, if I show empathy, if I support them, then eventually I'll get to the right person. But it's a box of chocolates day one. All right, the other thing that I've learned about, like, and I mentioned before, like, how do I know as an IC if people value me? And it's all about, like, do they share private information with you? The other thing is, how do I know as a manager if my direct reports respect me? And I said it earlier, do they bring stuff to the one-on-one? One of the biggest signs that your directs respect you is they invest in one-on-ones. They spend time with you, they take it seriously. My one-on-ones are usually scheduled for like 30 minutes, and we fill the 30 minutes easily because we're sharing, we're talking. That is like one of the biggest signs of the fact that, okay, these people actually believe that I offer value. If you view your manager as valuable, you're going to invest in this one-on-one time with them. And you're going to make sure that it's rich, that it's fit for purpose, that you're also contributing to that experience. That's signaling to your manager that I value you. Now, the one sign of disrespect going the opposite direction, and this has happened to me, is if your direct report goes around you and goes to your manager, that's never a good sign. Now, there are times where, like, I would understand that because maybe I'm not doing my job right, or maybe they're misinterpreting what I'm doing. But, like, I've had times where, like, totally, for reasons that I don't understand, this person's, like, going around me, right? That's the biggest sign of disrespect. And I've had a couple of times where, just as a manager, I was supposed to do this thing and provide it to this person over here, and I did that, right? So I'm trying to be as unclear as I can, but this IC gave me information that I was supposed to give to this person over here, and I did it, but then this IC felt that I wasn't gonna do this for some reason, so they told one of my peers, hey, I don't think anyone's gonna give this information. Can I give it to you? Then you give it to this person. And in these examples that I am telling you about, because it's happened over my career a few times, I never understood why, because every situation had already given information to that person. And my peer came to me and said, hey, you should know this person came to me for this thing that they didn't think that you were going to do, because I respect you, I'm letting you know, and I told them to come to you about this, right? And so I'm very lucky to have the relationships with my peers where I would get that signal. But if you really, as a manager, if you see that happening, then that means that you really lost that person, and there's some repair work that you need to do. And I've done that repair work before, and it's hard work, but it's very, very rewarding. So yes, one-on-ones are a sign. Going around is a sign of disrespect. So really important. All right, the other thing, you're now a manager. Well, guess what? You have new peers. You probably are having a peer as a product manager. Maybe you have like the designer. There's other managers that you're working with. And it's really important to understand that the incentive structure for your peers are often not the same as your incentive structure. Because a lot of product managers where I've worked, they're not people managers. They're just pure product managers. They don't have any direct reports. As an engineering manager, yes, I'm responsible for like the engineering of the team. I'm also a people manager. So when I'm navigating the problems that always happen in work and what we're going through, I'm always thinking about, well, the people impact. I'm always thinking about, okay, how can I align this with what in one-on-ones I've heard that this person needs? And there's things that I know as a manager that's private that I'm not able to divulge to other people. And so I have all that in my mind. But you have like product manager that just wants to get work done, wants to get the roadmap executed, wants to get all the feedback that they've gotten from customers into the product. If they don't have any people reporting to them, often they don't care about the people management aspect, right? I've had conversations over my career with different product managers where we're going through some challenge where someone's not maybe pulling their weight or they're going slower than this person thinks. And like, I know like, oh, this person's like going through a divorce or they're having issues in their private life that, because I had the relationship with that person where they would tell me, and I cannot tell this person that, right? But I can say, hey, I know that there's some challenges there. I'm working with this person to rectify a few things. Can I get some time? And I've had some version of the product manager on our team saying, I don't care about any of that. Just make sure that their problems don't become my problems. Like, I've heard that. I mean, that's almost a direct quote, right? Because like, they're not accountable for the people. So as a manager, again, people aren't going to tell you this, right? So I'm telling you, so go forth and do good things. But I'm just telling you that like, you have to understand that a lot of your peers don't have the incentives that you do. So you have to work with them and understand that, and you have to get the work in a format that they will be able to appreciate. So I always, in those situations, make sure, okay, let's get these things going. Let's deliver these things, because this person only speaks the language of delivery. They don't speak the language of humanity. And I have to understand the difference. And that's just part of being a people manager, right? People are going to tell you this. All right, one other thing about being a manager, documentation is king. Write it down. If you, just like I talked about having a brag doc, I have a document, a running document with all of my directs in it. And whenever they do something, I write it down, put a date on it. Oh, so-and-so did this. So-and-so did a great presentation because our department did this thing and they did a presentation, or so-and-so did a great demo during our sync of like the work that they did in the last sprint increment, whatever you use to measure time, because I need to have something to remind me as well. It's not going to be, I would imagine, as thorough as their brag documents, but like I'm trying to make sure that I have that kind of documentation. That's also important when there's performance problems. And as a manager, I would love to say I've had all high performers, and I've had a lot of them, but I've had people who had challenges, who had performance improvement needs, and you gotta document that as soon as you see that. You have to keep a list of these things. Write the good stuff too, but if you have to have a hard conversation with a direct report, and you're kind of knowing this is like going on the road towards separating them from the company, you need to have documentation, like pretty much contemporaneous documentation about what you've observed. Because when you go to HR to have the conversation with them to get them aligned, they're gonna ask, where's the documentation? Did you write this down? You need to make sure you can, yes, I'm adding you to this document right now. Because a lot of companies, HR, and the rules vary by country, by company and all that, you need to show that months of low performance consistently has been a challenge. I would also say that if you're a manager and you have a low performer or someone that's struggling, get HR involved sooner rather than later. Because if you wait too long, HR is surprised. And then you are having to defend. You want HR to be a partner and say, hey, I know we talked about this a month ago. Some things have gotten better, but these are the things that I'm still working on. Documentation is gold. And because it's hard, because like, I don't want to have this person lead the company. And I have things that like I'm struggling to maybe explain to them. So like, I feel guilty as well, but my job is to be an objective observer of their performance and to do what's best for them, but also for the team, for the company. And documentation helps you get those emotions out of the way. So it's hard, but like that's been critical in my career. And so, yeah, that's really important. A note about promotions. I've written many promotion packets at different companies, and what is a winning packet varies. But one thing I will say, for those of you who are managers, you may be asked to write a promotion packet that like you don't believe in, right? You're like, I know this person's not ready. And then this person may say, or your manager may say, well, let's write the promotion packet and then put it through the process. And if they don't make it, well, then we'll get feedback about what they need to do. And then we can put a plan together and bake that into the next document. And if they make it, well, maybe you were wrong. Maybe they were ready. So I understand why people do this. But like, I always want to make sure that if I am putting my name on a promotion packet, that I believe it's solid, that I believe that it's like, no, this person is absolutely ready, because I don't want to be the person that when the people above me get the packet, it's like, oh, no, the packet from Anjuan, this person's not ready. And then if you keep doing that, people will doubt your ability, or I should say my concern, my fear is that people will doubt your ability to assess performance. So I always try to get out of that. And I've gotten pressure to do that, but it can lead to you being in a space where people doubt your ability to assess performance. All right. I mentioned that we're kind of culturally made to not want to have conflict. And that means that we're culturally made to not like to tell people no. And as a manager, it's really important that you can tell people no, because I have been in a situation so many times where I've said yes to something that kept me from, I said yes to something that I really didn't care about, that made me say no to something that I did care about. And if you say yes, and we're culturally constructed to say yes and to not let people down, like we want to be like, oh, you chose me to do this? Yes, I'll do it, right? And then you find yourself overwhelmed and not having the time to do the stuff that you really value. And that's very, very dangerous. So I have a few ways that you can say no. I'm going to go through these because I think that it's so important to be able to do this. One, and you say, oh, hey, Mr. Manager, Mr. VP, we'd love to do that. Right now, my plate's full. I don't have space to do that. So that's one. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because I want to get to my last slide. Or you can say, hey, I know you want me to do that. I dedicated myself to this and this and this. And so doing that will not let me have the integrity that I like to have about what I commit to. You can also say, well, I know you want me to do this, but if I do this, that's going to impact these other things you already asked me to do. So you're saying, do you want to change the sequence that I work on? And often they're going to like, oh, no, that's really important, and I'll come back later. You can also do what I call like the chess move, right? This is my favorite, castle. You can say, oh, I can't do this, but I can do that. And then you do it in a way that works for you, right? And then finally, you can say polish. Like, yes, I could do that, but it's not going to have the level of polish and quality that I want. So you want to make sure that you always frame people asking you to do things in terms of, do you person requesting this, do you like quality? Do you care about my workload? Do you care about other work that I'm doing? And often they're like, oh yeah, no, actually you should keep doing what you're doing, right? I can go into more detail, but I'm getting to the end of my time. All right, there's one thing I want to say. As a person of color, as an underrepresented person in technology, and that is, I know that I've been the first Black manager for a lot of people that I've worked for. For the women in the audience who've been managers, you've probably been the first woman, in some cases, that they've ever worked for. And like, it's not to like cast shade, but it's human nature for the first time something happens for you to think it's weird, right? If we walked outside and like kangaroos fell from the sky, we're like, whoa, that's weird, right? Because like, this doesn't happen. I mean, we're in Australia, maybe that does happen, I don't know. But like, we would think that that's weird. So like this first person as your manager, and then they've all been this type, and then you get to this new, not that thing, it's easy to think, I don't know how this is gonna go. And that means that there are times when you may have doubt about this person that's purely just based on the fact that they're not what you're used to. I'm not saying that this person is is misogynistic or racist or sexist. It's just you're different. And so I just always want people to know that if you see someone who's underrepresented, have a little bit more compassion, have a little bit more empathy, because like their path to getting there has probably been tough and it's been challenging. And I will also say, especially if you have a Black woman as a manager, that person has really had a hard time, because I've had many men managers, women, I've had Black men, I've had Asian men, I've had Indian men. I've never had a Black woman over 25 years as a manager, so it's just very rare. So just for my Black women who are hearing this, or those of you who see, if you see a Black woman in technology leadership, a little bit of grace. I would appreciate you showing that person that. All right, here we come to the end of my presentation, and we're actually at time. I have some frequently asked questions that I get when I need time at the end, but I think I've made the clock. So thank you for your time. Please go out to your careers. Your career is not something that happens to you. You have agency to make it what you want it to be. Thank you.